What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie, the proper Movie Schmovie podcast. The timeline, the sacred timeline has been restored, I guess.
I know. Restored is the right word for it. Mysteriously broken and mysteriously restored.
Yeah. Too bad
it's weird. Go ahead, Ronald.
Too bad we had to stab Kang to get this all straightened out. It's fucking weird.
Is that what that was? Okay. Yeah.
You know, I don't think that was the only Kang, Ronald. I think we're gonna have more trouble from this Kang character.
It seems like it.
It's just bad news when a Kang rolls into town.
It just seemed too easy.
The timing was perfect. Just how that happened right at the season finale for Loki. It's just it's almost like it was planned or something. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone behind the scenes was planning it. You mean
that's what it was. But yeah, welcome back to Movie Schmovie, the sacred timeline of Movie Schmovie, the proper Movie Schmovie podcast feed. Again, episode 307. I'm Steve. I'm here as always with.
I'm Ron.
And I'm John.
Yeah. The proper versions of ourselves, the ones we've all known.
Yeah.
Pretty sure
loved
we are,
for 10 years.
Yeah. Not Roland Jones.
Not Roland Jones. Although, a good hang.
By the way, we didn't say what we are in our variant selves. I have a feeling mine is just John Walker backwards, which is Naj Reclaw.
I like that actually a lot.
What about you, Steve? What do you think your identity was?
Mine backwards just be Nevetz Ritter.
Okay. I guess that's true. Ritter, you're right. Your last name is a palindrome, as they say.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I got that going for me. I'll just go by my last name in all the timelines, so you never know which one I am.
Yeah,
it's really screw things up. Yep.
But there's another dimension where your name actually is Reader, and where people called you Ritter, and you let them. It's the flip of what happened.
Yeah.
Because you had me believing it was Reader for a really long time. I don't know if you remember. People who listen to the show might not remember that Steve's name is spelled Reter, and we worked at the same place. And I said, I think somehow I said something that was like, is it Reader? Is that okay? Or something like that. And you were like, yeah, sure. So I walked around calling you Steve Reader, and then one day we were on this podcast and I referred to you giving a quick opinion on something. I said, a quick read from Steve Reader. And then you said, yeah, that would be great if not for the fact that my name is not pronounced Ritter or not pronounced Reader. And then we came up with quick Ritz for Steve Ritter, which is better anyway, because we put in the little Ritz sound effect when that came up.
Yeah.
But so how much do you go around just letting people say your name wrong and not correcting them? Because you had such a good attitude. You were like, yeah, that's fine. You didn't correct me. You could have totally said, no, it's Ritter. Yeah. But you were like, yeah, whatever you want. It's cool.
well, the funny thing is, I just my whole life, it's been half my family, extended family, I guess, locally in this Baltimore area, there's a lot of family around here, and they half go by Ritter, half go by Reader. Yeah. Depending who in the family, it's so I just don't care, honestly. Even at work still, it's half it's Reader, Ritter, it's all kinds of things. I know you're talking to me. Right. It's fine. I don't mind. It's all good.
Yeah. It falls into the category of I knew what you meant. So let's not worry about it. Right. Yeah. Well, that's very big of you.
Thanks, man. So it's good to be back. It's good to be, we initially had talked about doing, another Watch 'Em All episode for our Nightmare on Elm Street series this week, but in the time between that crossover event with Marvel Schmarvel and now, we somehow managed to watch a few things that it seems like maybe it's a little more timely to discuss some of these newer titles that all of us have seen, some of us have seen, but just to kind of get it on the podcast and talk about it while these things are either newly in theaters, newly streaming on whatever digital platform they may be on. So we're going to do that this week. We're going to talk about a couple of news items at the top of the show, but then we have a lot to talk about, so we'll kind of just jump through these things in probably some sort of quick manner just to kind of cover as much as possible. But Ronald, you had mentioned before we recorded, our news bit section that we usually do for the podcast is very Marvel heavy, and I'm okay with that.
Heavy, man.
I'm okay with it. Marvel Schmarvel, it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a delay until we do another episode for whatever it may be time to. So I'm good with it if you guys are. I think it's timely. I think, people love Marvel stuff, and Marvel's all over the place right now. So
hell yeah.
What news has come down the pike, as they say, Marvel related.
The
So
Marvel
I guess one of the biggest things is Michaela Coel, who is really pretty popular from her HBO miniseries. Why can't I remember the name of it, man?
I May Destroy You.
I May Destroy You.
Yeah.
And she has written a show as well. Why can't I'm having a crazy brain fart. I wrote all the stuff down. But she will be she's been announced to be in the Black Panther film, Wakanda Forever. And it seems to be two running theories kind of simultaneously. One is a lesser known character, Madam Slay, a character in Black Panther who was the love interest of Killmonger and has the ability to bring people back and is really cool and amazing. Really rare character, doesn't really get talked about quite as much. Isn't really even in the newer run of the comics, if I'm not mistaken. And then the other theory is that she may be cast as Storm. But Michaela Coel is like a powerhouse actress. She's just incredibly funny. And does, as we've seen, drama in a way that's really raw and pretty incredible. So how you guys feel about that? Chewing Gum is the name of her show. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. Yeah, what do you guys think?
John?
I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with what I always think about this Marvel announcements. One of the reasons why it would be possible to run a feature that's just Marvel announcements is that they're at this point where they kind of get anybody, and that includes everybody from like people with huge legacy careers, like people like Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer and all that shit, to like William Hurt, etc., to people like who are coming up and who are like on the on the edge of what's new and what's fresh to people. And so to me, that just is exciting. I mean, it all gets a little bit homogenized by the Marvel brand, and by the time something comes out, it is kind of put through some kind of a ringer. But I think we're seeing that they're willing to experiment with tone and with just what the feel of a project might be a little bit more as they go along. They've always said that, and they're kind of putting that to the test now. So yeah, I always get excited when I hear a name like that announced for a Marvel movie, because it seems to me like it kind of legitimizes it in a way that they're not just looking at quote unquote big names, household names. They're actually looking at who might be the most interesting artists that are working right now. So I don't know the show. I always thought it looked really cool. That I Will Destroy You, I May Destroy You. Is that what it? I may have watched part of an episode, but I definitely was like, oh, this is cool. This has it has a very naturalistic kind of interesting tone. I don't know. I think there's reason to be, just like I always say about this stuff, there's reason to be somewhat skeptical about how much of a splash one actor can make in the middle of this type of machinery. But there's also reason to be hopeful, because as recently as Jonathan Majors popping up on Loki, we see how an actor actually can, have a lot to do, have a lot to chew on in one of these Marvel, maybe villain roles, maybe not. It's not all just being told where to stand in front of a green screen and shouting important sounding lines. Some of these people get to play characters. So let's hope that this person is one.
Hell yeah, man. That's pretty cool. And the next piece of information is about Blade, the Mowgli. I kind of mentioned this film last year, directed by Bassam Tariq. He will be doing a Blade movie. So these are two Muslim Americans. The director, Bassam Mahershala Ali. I don't know if you've ever seen any of Bassam's like TED Talks or anything like that, but he has started this kind of initiative to kind of bring positive light to Muslim Americans and Muslim culture just in general. So I'm really very down to see what this guy brings to the table. Mowgli was like a super emotional, very interesting film with a lot of like kind of indie stuff to it. So I haven't seen anything that feels very big like Blade would be, but maybe that's what this needs. Maybe this needs like a small scale story that Blade could kind of move through.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of like their approach to a lot of these Marvel movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like, and some people criticize this, and I don't know that I definitely don't agree in general with this, but like, when you look at like Chloe Zhao or Kate Shortland, like a lot of these directors that they've gotten for some of the more recent Marvel movies or upcoming ones, they're not, like you just said, basically they're not directors that have any kind of real track record or like known for like big action or a lot of what these movies deliver. And some of that is relying on like this idea that Marvel kind of ensures that these movies at least like look similar or are presented similarly in some sort of fashion. And a lot of that action kind of looks like that Marvel brand of action. So, a lot of that stuff is like kind of questioned, and whether some of that is handled by like second unit directors and things like that, which it very well could be in terms of stunts and the way those action scenes are shot and kind of assisting these directors if that's the case. I don't know that it is. But I think the motivation is like you're saying, Ronald, is to kind of get more unique voices where if they're going to be fit into a system where Marvel's going to ensure that these movies look a certain way or have some sort of benchmark for action, that they're at least starting at the point where the person in charge of this production in general is able to offer something different, like this more of a story beat or more of a human piece or a narrative piece that people like the three mentioned just now. You have Black Widow, Eternals, even what's his name that's doing Shang-Chi, Dustin Crest, what is his last name? They don't really have like a history of anything really. I mean, just some smaller films that were like well received human movies, like very character driven dramas. So it just seems like, all to just say, like it's definitely a consistent approach they seem to be taking with the way they are selecting directors for their movies, and committing to that. Destin Daniel Cretton is the guy doing Shang-Chi, who had done like Just Mercy and The Glass Castle, like Short Term 12. Like these are very like character driven movies. But then you put him in like this massive like kung fu action movie, and like how does that work? And it's like, well, it's just gonna work. You just like kind of believe it's gonna work. And Blade, very excited for that. I love Mahershala, obviously. We all are big fans of his, and I know you were kind of talking positively about Mogul Mowgli last year, so it's an interesting choice, and especially because there were other bigger names being kind of thrown around for Blade over the past few weeks, that it ended up going to him. So it's kind of a cool announcement, I guess.
By the way, I had myself muted, so I didn't. I was like talking for a second. It took me a second to realize, oh, that's why Steve didn't seem to hear me. But also like the fact that these people are indie darlings, they're making movies that are getting a lot. I mean, so that thing you're saying about they're getting swallowed by this machine, I think that's something you always worry about when you hear about studios pegging someone interesting to be like part of a franchise or whatever. But maybe Marvel is at this point where they're going to get more bold, even because I think at this point they should be encouraged. Don't you think? By people's reaction, they're throwing a lot at the wall and seeing what sticks. And so I don't know. I feel like the fact that, say, the Eternals, everyone has said that it didn't look that much like a Marvel movie that we come to expect. It still had certain moments that felt like they were those big trailer moments. So maybe they are becoming more bold and letting certain directors. I mean, with Chloe Zhao, they have an Oscar winner on their hands. So it's like,
definitely.
I think that, I mean, again, it's to say that these movies are high profile is ridiculous and obvious, but to say that maybe that some of this talent, I mean, we saw it with Ryan Coogler, we've seen it with James Gunn on a certain level. Some of this talent is able to bring sort of an auteurist film sort of through that system, something that's got a person's imprint. So if they're actually allowing some of these movies to be stranger and smaller and more unique, I mean, that's better for movies, right? Like we like the soap opera, but we don't want to just be like on the drip of the exact same thing. So I think that until we hear the horror stories about one of these directors being run off the project because of studio meddling, I think thus far they have a pretty decent track record with these.
Hell yeah, man.
People. So,
and speaking of track record, last piece of Marvel news.
Please,
it's so crazy.
Make it in.
Victoria Alonso, who's the executive vice president for Marvel Studios, just announced that officially Miss Marvel and Hawkeye are coming out this year.
Yep.
So regardless of how you feel about the train that is Marvel, you got 2 more shows coming on top of the films. The 3 Marvel Studios films, and then that doesn't even count the Sony. Yeah, this is a crazy year for Marvel, but it's interesting.
But seeing how they all interlock is what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like seeing when those things might arrive based on what things they might be setting up for the movies or what they might be reacting to. I mean, obviously the Black Widow movie ended with a stinger that could set us up for one big piece of what the Hawkeye show could be. And I think Miss Marvel is, you know, an interesting property that I don't know what it would connect directly to, but for them to announce that those are coming before the end of the year, part of me thinks that's just them saying, we're going to try to have something going almost at all times in terms of the Marvel television shows. But it also, have you guys given any thought to like what that could mean about when those shows will come out and when they'll fall in the schedule in relation to the movies? Because both shows premiering by the year's end doesn't mean that they're both going to finish airing by the year's end.
Yeah.
So we could have one of those shows coming out like at the end of the year.
Yeah, right at December or something.
But there's room in the fall for for like a 6 or 8 episode run, you know, to happen like after What If and in between all the movies. But I mean, do you guys have any thoughts about that? Like what that might mean for the stories, or do you think they're going to be independent of the movies? Because it's kind of hard to see maybe how Miss Marvel would connect to any of the movies we have coming up. But maybe it's maybe it branches off from Eternals, or maybe it branches off or has something to do with Spider-Man. Who knows?
Yeah, it feels like it. It feels like there's, like, you kind of hinted at this, and I didn't think about it quite as clearly as you said. Like, that Kevin Feige kind of said it first. John, you kind of said this, that he was like, you don't have to watch the TV shows to watch the movies, and now it feels like he's kind of done a gotcha on some of us. You know what I mean? Like, it's not absolutely required, but if you want to get some of the sides, in the movie where they're like, wow, that was really crazy what happened in Russia with, it's just like you have to see these things in order for you to get the references now. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I feel like it's going to be the commitment. I mean, I think like maybe it's not as imperative right now because they are kind of, in a little, not a lull, but like they're ramping up now, it's starting to come fast. So it's maybe not as like explicitly clear, like how quickly it's going to tie into these movies and dictate what's happening across the movies. But I do think like from this point forward, it seems like, I don't know how to predict what it will do, but it does seem like you're going to, you're going to need to see these shows to get some parts of the movies, to like connect these things. And I think, even how they've already started to play with the timeline of the shows and the movies is interesting because like, I don't know, I think we talked about it a little bit about the Black Widow, like stinger, the fact that Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character, like Valentina, is present in Black Widow, post Civil War. And then we see her in, Captain and Winter Soldier. You then know her presence has been in there, for that time, longer than we thought, I guess, in general. Yeah. It's not a new thing post Endgame. Like she's been manipulating people. There's language of your new target or your next target. Like she's already been working with Yelena in some way when we see her. So I think that's really cool that they kind of are directing us from there to the Hawkeye series. And, obviously that timing is like, it's kind of in the air. It's a little gray still, but I just think that they're already kind of flexing a little bit in terms of what they can do with these shows. And, that's not even discussing the whole Loki of it all. Like what that
or the fact that they released that great Hawkeye trailer, like almost a year ago.
Yep. I mean, I blame Kang for that. Never forget. I blame Kang for that, man.
Yeah, it leaked through, and John somehow saw it and he pulled it out.
A sleepy guy without glasses saw it on his phone and thought it might be the worst Marvel trailer ever. And that was that was what I wanted to say. It was terrible. And it's that's clearly fake.
So hilarious.
But no, it's interesting how much people have known about these projects and that they know enough, to like, we've known about the Hawkeye show for a while. We've known about Kate Bishop, the Haley Steinfeld Haley Steinfeld character, that it's like to comics readers, especially, people that have really followed there was a recent Hawkeye run that had a lot with her. That's a lot to be excited about, but how does it fit in? What does it mean for our other the universe. The idea that this could be at least put in motion by the idea that someone's trying to make him pay for what happened to Natasha in Endgame. That again, just like Marvel they have a knack for doing this, connects this new idea to something that's very rooted in something that we already have proven we care about as audiences. So even if that's not the main story, and it kind of seems like it couldn't sustain too much, like Yelena can't be working against, I mean, if she's to be a hero, she can't be working against Hawkeye the whole time. But I do think that the idea that those two would have to come to terms. I mean, Jeremy Renner might have some good stuff to play there, because he clearly would be all torn up and feel guilty about what happened to Natasha. So I don't know. I think that feels fertile, but it also feels like, let's hope there's a good news story. Because if there's one thing these Marvel shows have done, it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how much does the new tone, the new idea, the new whatever the show is, how much does that, like, is that as good as what we're bringing to it, the kind of connections to the other stuff? And I don't know if they've have yet to totally have a perfect version of that, but I think, to me, it seems like they've tried different versions as they've gone. So Hawkeye could be like, I don't know what kind of story it would be. Is it going to fit right in with the tone of Falcon and Winter Soldier, or is it going to be its own little thing? Like, I don't know anything about the villains on that show. I don't know anything about like how crazy it gets, but
let's see.
It could sneak up on us with something really cool.
Yeah. So maybe we can touch on some things that
are not Marvel,
are not Marvel, and things we haven't seen. Kind of some breadcrumbs. Jordan Peele released the poster for his upcoming film Nope, which looks like
great title.
Which is just like a cloud and what looks like a kite string or
kite tail coming out of it.
Kite tail coming out of a cloud. That's
huge and high up. Yeah, there's no telling. I mean, he can keep us guessing until we see the movie, but surely there'll be some marketing that will bring us closer to this idea than that. But it's a year from now. It's literally a year from now the movie comes out.
But three amazing: Keke Palmer, Daniel Kaluuya, Stephen Yeun. I feel like I never pronounced his name correctly because I watched a podcast where he corrected somebody and said, "My name's not pronounced." I have to rewatch it, but Stephen Yeun. But this looks
it's like Stephen Ritter.
Yeah.
Sometimes he corrects you, sometimes he doesn't.
Sometimes he doesn't. What do you guys think about the poster? I mean, there's not much we could say from the poster, but
it's a good start. I mean, like it makes me very curious, which is like what he does so well. And like you said, you hear four things. It's Jordan Peele, Kaluuya, Keke Palmer, Stephen Yeun, and you're like, yep, that works. And it's like, and the tag, like a new terror or whatever that tagline across the top is. It's just like, of course. Like we were talking on our thread, it's like he's like the guy. Like I feel like in the genre space of like the horror, suspense, thriller, whatever you want to tag it as, like Jordan Peele is probably the one that you see that name associated with really anything that he's doing himself directly or even through Monkey Paw. Like it's like he is a huge draw across the board and an Academy Award winner, which is crazy to see that on the poster too. It's amazing. Crazy. We got 2 Academy Award winners on this poster. And he's like the guy. I mean, I'd say probably him. Like James Wan has the same kind of pool probably in the horror community.
That trailer was released too.
For Malignant. Like it's just like, there's a couple of the newer school of the more current modern filmmakers that are out there. Like those two probably. Mike Flanagan's probably the third one, that are just
where you could put that name on there and you could pretend at least that name means something to people. But even if people don't know the name Mike Flanagan, or if they don't know what all James Wan has done, if you put up on the screen, if you say, whatever it was, Insidious,
they did,
there's three big ones: Insidious,
Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring.
Right, but I mean, like if you're a horror fan, then those names mean something to you.
And
I think Jordan Peele is now one of those kind of brand name, maybe even more brand namey than a lot of folks, because he already had a certain amount of fame. But like the fact that he can just say he can drop a poster and it's all over the place and people are talking about it. I mean, that's And for him to be a guy who produces and co-creates and all that shit, this is another baby of his. Like this is that follow-up that you're kind of waiting for. And I think that adds the weight of excitement to it.
It's exciting, man.
Yeah.
Have you seen any trailers lately, Steve, that have caught your attention?
Gosh, maybe one big long trailer I saw today that was great.
What
trailer? He's talking about Dune.
Oh.
Yeah, the Dune trailer. Dune trailer too.
Yeah.
The full trailer.
Yeah, the 3.5 minute trailer, which I first saw that and I was like, oh man, 3.5 minutes. It seems like they don't know how to tighten up this trailer. But by the time it got to the end, I was like, I could have watched a little bit more of that footage. I mean, I think Denis Villeneuve is one of our guys in terms of just we've liked a lot of his movies, and I think Dune is a property that I've tried to read it a few times. I've never quite gotten into it. I know people who love it. I do know a lot about it. I know it's a dense mythology. I know that it actually is very, in some ways, kind of sophisticated and adult compared to a lot of other fantasy that gets turned into movies. And of course, we have the famous David Lynch movie that was an attempt to consolidate it down into one thing. And then I think there's been like a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries or something as well. But this just the scope of it, the visuals that Denis is able to produce. I mean, we know he's kind of a master visual stylist. He gives things such atmosphere, and there's a kind of reality and yet a kind of beauty to his images. And he showed he can do the kind of fantastical stuff in Blade Runner. I mean, I'm in the bag for this movie already, but I think this trailer did a pretty good job of of hooking you in as though you're just a person, just a moviegoer. What's this about? I thought it did a pretty neat job of setting up a fantasy world that I'm intrigued to see a lot more of. And the cast is unbelievable.
It's every star that you could possibly think of. And then I forgot.
Yeah.
And then Batista shows up. Dave Batista shows up. And then I forgot that he was in that. And then another person. That's every person that's pretty amazingly popular right now is in this film.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to do atmosphere like I've never seen. There's a lot. I don't watch a lot of films and feel small. I watch that film and I'm like, I'm in a new world that I haven't seen before. The scale of it, the ambiance, the sounds are sounds I've never. Every time I watch a movie, there's sounds and things I've never seen before. Like I was thinking about Ex Machina.
Yeah.
With the dance scene in the middle of the film, it's just such a random thing to have, but it really captured how strange this world was. It's like it's the suspense, and then right in the middle, an intense dance scene. It's like these things he likes to do that are like super unique.
Oscar Isaac
dancing with this taco meat out, Deep V. Just a real cool touch.
He looks great in this too. Everybody looks like they actually get a chance to act, which is the other thing about people. It's not like, I mean, as much as I've enjoyed Star Wars over the years, someone being cast in a Star Wars movie does not mean they necessarily get much to chew on as an actor, and this actually looks like character. I mean, again, it's a deceptive trailer, but I feel like you get a feel for the kind of family relationships and where some of the intensity is going to come from. And Oscar Isaac is a big part of the trailer for me, but I also think the trailer kind of tells you not to expect him to last too long.
Do you think
that like an early death kind of, mentor figure type?
You think that Jason Momoa headhunted Dave Bautista on the set of this film to be in a new season of C? It's something. It's like something about they must have been like, man, we got good chemistry. Let's see what happens.
Let's keep working together.
Let's be brothers in something.
You're the only guy that makes me feel small. Yeah, I like to feel small sometimes. I want to be the little spoon.
Do we just become best friends?
Yeah.
So that's cool. I can't wait to see the film, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks awesome, man.
Yeah, so that's the rundown of.
Wait, there's a couple more trailers, real quick.
Oh, which trailers? Okay.
Well, the three that dropped the same day. You had the new trailer for *Malignant*. We mentioned it briefly. The James Wan
*Malignant*,
original horror movie coming out. Looks pretty good. I mean, obviously, like I said before, it's like James Wan's name on something, especially an original horror property. It's like, yeah, of course I want to see it. The trailer looked pretty cool. The Jackass Forever trailer came out finally, which
That
I'm
looks so fun.
in the bag for Jackass movies. Like that's some of my favorite experiences watching movies in theaters, like comedies especially. Some of the like most collective laughed, like the most. Oh man, I can remember seeing all of them in theaters, and it's just like a blast.
And this one
So
has
hopefully,
this one has like a new angle. Like they took kind of the legacy of Jackass, and they took like Loiter Squad, who obviously is Jackass inspired, and they got all these fans of Jackass to deal with the stunts and all this stuff.
Be in on it,
yeah. So it feels like I was thinking what could be the angle in this one that will pull me in besides it just being the gang, just this legacy and the clips of people talking about how much they were affected by it felt oddly like kind of emotional. Like, man,
it was. You're right.
This is spanned 20 years or so, and these kids are like, they're Johnny Knoxville is like 50, and he's still doing crazy shit and almost breaking his neck. It's
crazy.
I love that about it, man.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait for that.
I mean, in the age of everything coming back and everything getting an extension and everything getting a reboot, of course, this is the kind of shit that almost becomes there's a layer that gets added with them being, like they never were supposed to do these things, but now they're especially not supposed to do them. So I think that kind of adds to the like if the sort of like the name to live up to the name. I think that like doing something when you shouldn't be doing it anymore and when you might be more at risk, to me it seems like it fits right in with the brand, the kind of extra risk, and everyone who's involved is like their story has kind of gone on, so I think and it was amazing to see how many people were like expressing that heartwarming kind of goodwill towards this. It's like, oh yeah, this is something people, it's like this, I don't know, those lovable Jackass boys are at it again. I feel like people take heart from that, and even the people that hate it. It's like, great, now you can be too snobby for Jackass again. It's just like the old days. We're all younger now.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. It's nuts. So I guess, are we going to rattle off some things we've seen?
Let's talk about some stuff we've actually watched.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Where should we start?
Maybe Fear Street.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Fear Street 1666
and Fear Street. We didn't talk about 1978 either. We talked about the first one. So yeah.
Okay. 1978 to me was, out of the three, the one that I was like, this tonally is what I want. It's like, feels like, those early horror films that I saw, and you think that they're gonna go easy on the kids, man, and no. It's like they purposefully were like, kids are, how I feel about kids getting hurt in films. It's a must, because it's like it's a thing that has to happen. It's not like in real life a killer would be like, oh, I'm gonna skip this. That psycho's gonna chop everybody up in this building, So I kind of love that this felt really, I was engaged throughout all three of them. What'd you think about 78? What'd you guys think about 78?
Steve?
I loved it. I mean, I kind of like love the whole series as a whole. It's probably I think it's probably my favorite of the three. The second and third one are kind of pretty close for me. Well, 78 and 66 are pretty close for me. But I think like the reason that 78 works, maybe has the edge, is because it kind of sits in the middle as like the middle chapter of something.
Yeah.
The second act of this large story. And it's still so engaging and so effective in keeping the story moving along, but also just kind of like expanding on the story and like showing new characters and connecting those characters to, the modern day 1994 characters that we already met. So I just think it did all that really, really well. And I think that it was a bit of a challenge for a movie that kind of comes in the middle, because it could end feeling like this really feels like a middle piece, But I didn't feel like it ended like that. It definitely ended in a sense where like I want to see the next one now, but I feel like it rounded that story out really well and kind of really set some of these characters up that we kind of met again in a different way, with their younger selves, the younger versions of the characters that we met in 94. But yeah, I kind of agree with what you said. Like for the 78, like I like that. Really, there was like, no holds barred, and with the kids at the camp. Like, who else is going to get killed at the camp? Of kids, it's going to be the
Yeah.
kids. But there are things that happen. It's funny you mentioned like the whole like, oh, I'm going to skip the kids. Like, I thought there was a really cool part in the movie where like that kind of literally happens.
Yeah.
Where the killer kind of skips a kid, and you're like, well, why is he skipping that kid? And it's a part of the whole story, and it makes a lot of sense once you see 66. And that stuff is really cool, and little things like that get thrown in. I just think it works so well. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like I think the whole thing worked extremely well. I think it's a huge hit for Netflix, and I think this was always conceived to be like a 3-series film, and it was when it was with Fox, it was supposed to come out in theaters, and I don't know how it would have landed in theaters, in terms of just the audience it would have reached, because like all 3 of these movies were trending in the top 1 or 2 spot on Netflix, in the weeks, and I think they're still in there now while we were recording this. But it seems like a lot of people have been talking about these movies, and it seems like 78 was probably the one that most people really liked the most. But I don't know. What did you think overall, John?
I mean, I think I'm sort of similar in the broad strokes. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was well made. Anything that kind of bumped me about it, I felt like it was minor compared to the stuff that I enjoyed, and I think the sort of experiment of it, I liked the way I just loved, once I saw what it was, and I was like, oh, you're gonna get one next week, and then next week you realize it's kind of like a binge model show. Yeah. It's almost like a 6-hour binge model show, but it's done differently, but keeping you on that hook, that like I like waiting a week, but not a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever they might do with breaking seasons up sometimes. So I think I enjoyed that, like the structure of it, the experiment of it. It did feel sort of fun. It added to the kind of pulpy fun of it anyway, that you knew that people were like logging in for like, oh, I got to see part 2. I got to see part 3. My son, Henry, who's 13 and a half, he and his friend Charlie are watching horror movies, and they had a sleepover and they were watching it, and they were referring to it like 1978 or 1666, or I mean, it's just funny to hear like that what we're talking about. It's like it worked. It got people talking about it. It got people like looking forward to the next one. I think that 1978 then might be a lot of people's favorite, and probably mine too, because that is something, if you're a horror fan, you have so much affection for those kind of camp killer movies. And even the trash aspect of those movies is not unknown to a horror fan. It's a little bit like telling a wrestler, this is all scripted. It's like, no shit, fuckwad. They still have to do the stuff. And with horror, it's like, I know this in a sense is, we know the formula, but the fun of how people respond to the formula, and what actors do and what directors do, and the creativity of the gore and all that. These movies kind of seem to, I'm not going to say they were like this super fresh spin, but I felt like they took all that stuff that people are fond of with horror movies, and they kind of spun it in it was new. There's a new vibe to this. It felt like it was meta in its way, without being, winking at the camera or spoofing, or even doing what Scream did, but it felt like it was very self-aware of what the rhythms of a horror movie are and what you expect to happen. And I guess because they were kind of adopting this like classic slasher structure in all 3 movies, to some extent, there's a slasher element. Definitely the first 2. It's like they know what you're expecting. So it's not like every death is this huge shock. It's just that the rhythm of the kills, the rhythm of, the who lives, who dies, there's a little bit of fun to be had there. And it was a little bit of every movie had a little bit of a surprise to it. And the structure of these movies is so kind of light in a strange way, and fun, which is a hard thing to say, but like kids are getting killed, but you're admiring the cleverness of it. The second movie, I had a spoiler that I should not have had, and I didn't know it until I was halfway into the movie, that I shouldn't have had it, because I looked up who someone was playing, and I saw a reference to that character's true name, and was like, oh, and I was watching the movie thinking we were supposed to know what I knew, and then getting to about the halfway point in the movie and going, wait a minute, there's a couple scenes where there's 2 characters together who are in danger, and I knew one of them, I knew they both survived. Let me put it that way. And I was like, well, this is weird that they would put 2 characters in danger that we know they both survive. And then I realized, like, oh, they didn't do that. I revealed something to myself by looking up like something. I think it was either IMDb or Wikipedia or something.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is, even with one of the big twists of the second movie ruined for me, so to speak, I found a different thing going on, knowing what the twist was, trying to see there's still a little game of cat and mouse with like, how is something going to happen? There's something we know is going to happen in that movie from the beginning. And it keeps you guessing. And I would say when it gets to the moment where the thing happens, it's so brutal and so like over the top that even I, who has watched, everything and used to watch movies because they had gore in them, I was like, oh, that was one axe, one whack with the axe too many, maybe 2 or 3 too many for me. It was hurting me physically to see. But I think it's interesting that these movies could do the thing they did. I think you'd have to step back and really look at what they did as far as the tone, because they managed to be funny and a little bit mean-spirited, but never like lacking sincerity with the characters, and never being too much at the expense of the characters. And getting to the end, close to the end, there was a moment where my family, we all agreed, well, I don't want anyone else to die. Like we've seen enough good people die. There's a core group there at the end, and you're sort of like, I now sort of have hopes that none of these people will meet their end. And the movies had shown that they would kill people though. And I feel like, I don't know, I guess I'm going on about it, but I think that that's an interesting trick that these movies pull. And over the course of 3 movies in 3 weeks, they really did make you feel like, well, these movies could have a mean twist and a mean turn. So I don't trust that anybody's going to make it out okay. Yeah. And that did make the climax kind of tense in a way that felt interesting. And I think that the idea that clearly they're going to try to expand this out into more and do either a second wave, a second season, a second trilogy, a spinoff. This feels like it could be that kind of Conjuring verse kind of thing where there's a lot of offshoots. I don't necessarily need that. I'm just saying, I think that's the intention here. And I think Netflix is probably eyeing this as an annual or something event, right? Like they have to be.
I think so. And I also think it's more than a coincidence that Starz just 6 days ago announced the John Wick 3-night movie thing.
Yeah.
Did you guys, the Continental is going to be a prequel of the John Wick story, and it's going to be 3 nights, 90-minute movies over 3 nights. More than a coincidence that they're announcing it right at the tail end of this movie series, because this worked. I mean, regardless of how you felt about the campiness of it, I think it's supposed to be campy, like you said, like you guys said, and it just worked. I mean, I could point out that racism didn't exist in 1666 in this movie, or that like this was more The Village than The Village was.
Yeah.
Like it just didn't look like 1660s. There was just too much modern shit to
that 16. No, I don't want to interrupt you too much, Ronald, but I just want to say that 1666, it handled that version of stuff, that village stuff that you're talking about. I thought it handled it with the scares and with the fun. It did a better job than so many people have tried. Yeah. And I'm not saying better, like I love the movie The Witch, but I think it's like a lot of people get left behind by The Witch. A lot of people don't feel brought along by The Witch. The Village is a famous kind of Shaggy Dog story that a lot of people feel like the twist didn't justify the movie. You're right. This tone was like, they actually got you going with that kind of colonial period stuff, but it didn't feel weighted down as so many things that are set in that time did.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like it's the first movie that I watched that took place back then, and I'm like, oh, this is how a mob gets started.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it happens. It's like you create some doubt, you create some sort of like two people competing, and well, you don't believe this person because they're evil, because they're a witch. It's like I was like, oh shit, man, let's kill this kid. It's like it got really, it escalated very quickly, but you could see how it could happen. It just was, I thought it was well done. And here's the last thing I'll say. The story shouldn't have made any sense, and somehow it did. It should not have made any sense. It shouldn't have spanned 3 time periods and wove the things the way that it did and been as logical as it was. But it really felt like they, without insulting your intelligence, were like, here's a little piece right here. Here's a little piece right here. This connects to this. Spatially, you got where things were. It was like when you saw a thing, you knew exactly where it was. Like when they show the underground stuff, I'm like, oh fuck, that's like under the mall where they showed the thing before with the. Anyway, it just, how I feel about space. I mentioned space a lot. It just did a very good job of spatially orienting you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we love it.
Well, I mean, I think we're saying
I mean,
that, yeah, love it or not, it was fun as hell. And I think that like fans of the genre definitely should see this. Like if I was talking to a friend recently who's a horror buff, and he was like, oh, I've heard I should watch this. And he seemed like he was really skeptical of it. And I think a lot of people think it's going to have that kind of Goosebumps R.L. Stein feel to it, but it so does not. It leans into that R without being, I thought, like overly violent or overly crass, but it definitely wants you to know that like, it's like, okay, it's a teen, it's like, it's for kids, and then it's not, it's so totally not. So I wondered about that from a marketing standpoint. Steve, have you heard anything about any demographic information or anything like that suggests that, like, I mean, I guess the kids are going to watch these movies. They make them for grownups. 13, 14-year-old kids are going to find them and watch them,
Definitely. I mean, I think it's like, it's kind of in that like little gray area of like a gateway, type of property for horror fans already. They're going to watch anyway if they're interested, maybe. But like, new types of fans of the genre who are kind of on the cusp of like, oh, this looks kind of interesting. And Netflix has kind of played a lot in that area. Like they've had a lot of those horror properties, and where they've made movies that are like a little campier, a little more of like an entry level type of horror movie. Like that series that they have, like is it called The Babysitter or whatever that series is. Like they have like 2 movies in there. That's like some of their highest watched movies. So I think in general, like it kind of serves a good purpose of pulling in horror fans, even ones that maybe are a little skeptical because it's R.L. Stein. But I do think that they've done a pretty good job at differentiating it against Goosebumps, because even from the source, Goosebumps was always geared at like a younger demo, where the Fear Street books and even its comparison to like Christopher Pike books, like they were definitely more teens, young adults. But yeah, I don't know. I think I think that this was like legitimately great personally. Like I was thinking back at like on the year so far, or even maybe beyond the year, like with the exception of seeing A Quiet Place 2, like I think this is some of the most excited I've been watching a movie, in the past like year or so. And especially because of the nature of the layout, like the week to week 3 in a row type thing. It was just such a satisfying experience consuming 3 movies for the kinds of movies that are like my favorite kinds of movies back to back, and they were all very good. And I think as the whole, I loved it in general. I hope they continue to do it like John was saying earlier. So what else did we watch? We or collectively, or the majority of us, or some of us?
Space Jam. Next? That's right. What do we think about Space Jam?
I did not see Space Jam, but I've been dying to hear you guys talk about it. Because see, I didn't see the first one, so I don't have like a love for the first one that this one could betray. I know a lot of people that saw the first one and don't think it was very good, but kind of have weird affection for it anyway. So I don't know where you stand with the first one or this one, but it doesn't seem like anybody's coming out defending this movie, at least that I've seen. So
I mean, the first one was a disaster. I mean, if you watch that movie, like it's a one of the things that's really hard to get through is what Michael Jordan's doing. I don't know if it's a performance. I don't know if he's very like, oh, we got to get the team together like that. And it just feels kind of weird. Now, LeBron has a little more, but you have a hard time feeling like a sympathetic feeling for him when he's not particularly kind to his kid. He's like kind of an asshole to his kid. And then the kid disappears and he's proving his worth. And look, man, I don't think this movie can be judged on the same level as like a Pixar film or something like that. This movie is schlop in terms of just what it represents. It's just it's a Nike commercial. It's a Warner Brothers property commercial. It's all that stuff.
A LeBron commercial.
It is a LeBron. It's a LeBron resume. The first 15 basically. Minutes are legitimately like just like a montage of his accomplishments.
Really? That's funny.
It's
well,
like
the first one was kind of like Michael Jordan worship too. So I guess that's
yeah.
But
but LeBron's an interesting guy, man, because he does have the chops. The writing was really bad though. Like I feel like a funny script would have blown this. This would have been knocked out of the park if you would have had. You know who I think should have done it? The Lego people.
Chris Lord and Phil Miller.
Yeah, Lord Miller. Like if they that it needed that quirk to it, like it felt like it was kind of self-aware, but in the worst way. Like it's like in a way that like an executive would be like, so the joke is going to be that LeBron is the greatest of all time. We're going to take that and we're going to topple it. We're going to spin it right on its head. And you're going to be the butt of the joke, LeBron. Everybody's going to make fun of you. You're going to love it. They're going to call you a dummy. They're going to make you look like a cartoon. It's like, that's not funny, man.
Right.
It has to be well written, and it just wasn't.
Well, no, it is
But
like you get up there and goof around, and it'll be funny, like as opposed to like actually having material. I've seen comedies like that before. So.
Yeah, it just. And Don Cheadle was amazing in this. Like Don Cheadle's doing something.
Oh my God.
It's a bad movie, man. But I gotta admit, I was entertained from start to finish.
I mean, that's the weird thing about it is that I feel like it is kind of like an entertaining family movie, like kind of like an all ages kind of across the board type thing. But I feel like yeah, sure, the Michael Jordan Space Jam is also probably not a good movie, but probably when it hit us at the point where we were like, a family or a younger child may watch this one, it would probably affect them a similar way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That Space Jam hit us, like, it's not a good movie, but I like Space Jam.
I like Space
Jordan
Jam too.
This movie is like, it's entertaining in a similar way, but I think like, obviously you mentioned like the script is like it's just horrible script. Like the dialogue is bad. I don't think LeBron is good in this movie really until the last like 10-15 minutes of the movie. And I think he has it. Like he was really good in Trainwreck. I mean, when he first enters the movie, it's like, I feel like it's like painfully bad. Like he's genuinely bad. And it kind of like set me like aside right away where I was like, oh, this is the opposite of kind of what I thought based on what I kind of was expecting from him. But I think the probably biggest thing that the movie kind of suffers from is just the idea that it's like, I don't know, I feel like where Space Jam, was it 96 when it came out? Like, it was like way more going for the meta stuff, like with the Looney Tunes and everything, where this one is really just super dependent on the Warner Brothers branding and like flexing as much IP as possible in whatever way they can in this story, whether it makes sense or not. You know, and I think
the montages of characters that really don't make sense. Like who's there?
That's what I'm saying.
Harry Potter, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and there's like live action scenes from Warner Brothers properties that they're interacting in.
Yes.
One are not kids related at all.
Yeah,
there's like there's like a Mad Max sequence.
Right. Yes.
There's like
a Matrix.
Casablanca Matrix. Yeah, like these are probably for the adults. These are probably for the Space Jam 96 fans.
Yeah.
But I mean, like for the family element, that stuff seems weird. And it kind of overshadows even, I think, what they're trying to do with the movie has a very positive message, which is a good thing for kids and for families.
Yeah,
like I do think that's there, but it just felt really messy and a pretty big miss, I think, in general, especially for, LeBron's production company, which is a big part of this. But I think it did well. I think it did well at the box office. Like it unseated Black Widow at theaters, where I think it did like 30 some upper 30s at the box office while also being on HBO Max. So
interesting.
I don't know. Interesting. Yeah, it's good. It's a good word.
Yeah. Oh, you saw Never Have I Ever, right?
Yeah.
So the opposite of Space Jam is probably Never Have I Ever.
So both of you guys saw it?
Yeah.
I didn't see it yet. Please tell me how. Tell me how it is.
That show is perfect. It is such a good show.
So it's a good follow up to the first season.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like I was kind of late to the first season, and I was messaging you guys on Friday, like, oh, I didn't even realize second season came out.
Right.
And just immediately dove in and watched it like in 2 nights. Yeah, man, I just like love the characters. The writing's great. I love the narration, works so well, and like you kind of get, little teases of the other characters' voiceovers from other celebrities through the season. And I just love I love Davy and like the crazy shit she goes through in high school. And and I'm a sucker for like the high school coming of age rom-com drama, whatever you want to call it. So I mean, this show really kind of is that genre, but it's got a fresh take on it, and and what they do with her family this season is, I think, works really well. And I don't know that it's as good as the first season. I mean, just because it's kind of, I don't know, a continuation of the same story, but in general, though, I thought the second season was great.
Yeah, we loved it. I mean, and my wife and I watched it the first time around, and then this one, when it came out, I was busy working on some projects or something down here in the basement, some audio stuff, and they were like looking for something to watch, and Nikki was like, "Can I?" Because we were getting ready to watch the second season, and she was like, "If Henry likes Never Have I Ever, can I watch? Do you mind if I watch the first season with him?" And I was like, "No, I wasn't planning on necessarily rewatching that anyway with you." And she said, "Yeah, okay." So they went up, and then they binged the first season like within a night or two, and then like were bugging me, "When are you going to watch Never Have I Ever?" And Henry was loving it. I mean, he thought it was so funny, but there were some moments, the three of us watching that second season in here, where we just had those big I mean, I don't know, there's some big laughs. There are some really big laughs. The characters, as Steve said, are great. And you remember that, but they continue to juggle them. I do think there's something about a first season for a show like that that's so special. And I have a feeling we might be saying same things about Dave and Ted Lasso when the second seasons are over too. It's not that the second seasons are like a step down. It's just that when a show arrives kind of perfectly formed, there's not much a second season can do that technically ups the ante. It's more just, do you love these characters? Okay, well, here's the continued story of those characters.
Yeah.
And they do try to keep you on the track of certain big things that you might feel are the themes or the ideas of the show. But you also feel like Davy on this show, Never Have I Ever, her story is open to the extent that you might end one season feeling one way and then start up the next season and realize the way you felt at the end of last season has some nuance to it. And this definitely, in terms of her love life, there's a lot of back and forth throughout the season, and there's a lot of characters kind of dealing with the similar thing in those teen years, that intensity of crushing and wanting someone to crush on you and wanting to be asked to the dance, and someone's with your ex, but are they really your ex, or why are they broken up with you? Is it your fault? And it's that kind of liking all the characters and seeing how the show kind of works hard not to give you many villains. I mean, there's a couple of maybe secondary or tertiary characters that you would say are there just to be antagonistic, but the show doesn't really have that many villains. And that is why it's kind of snuck up on me that, like, if the show does have a villain, and we may have said this about the first season, it's Davy. That we're kind of watching the person who has the most difficulty getting along, I mean, she's very relatable. I say all this, I love her character. She's so great because she is often the one who's wrong. And sometimes you watch her going on her apology tour and you feel like, well, she shouldn't feel so bad, or she shouldn't be dragged so much through the mud. Like, why does she always have to be the one? Like, not only is she maybe the one who's the most careless and the most erratic, but she also is the one who's kind of left holding the bag most often. So if you love her, you'll kind of love the show because her character kind of defines it.
Yeah. Cool. And I guess maybe the main event, maybe.
Maybe so. A big movie that's hitting home viewing at the day this podcast comes out. A movie that you may have been reading reviews about a lot recently if you're a movie follower. Zola.
Based on a Twitter thread, or I guess rant, because they weren't threads back then, in 2015, about Zola, a woman who embarked upon one of the craziest adventures that I've ever heard of in real life. I've experienced pieces of things like this, but never anything quite like this adventure, man. So Janicza Bravo did this one. Great director. Taylor Page stars in it.
Riley
Keough. Domingo Coleman.
God, he's so good.
Coleman Domingo.
Coleman Domingo, but he's kind of all over the place. You know what I mean? Like, he's starting to pop up in all these movies, but he's really good in this. Like,
what he's doing in this film is something that I haven't really seen before, man. It's intense and funny and scary, and he has this like presence about him, man. And when he breaks and you hear this, like, I'm not gonna give it away, but when he breaks and he goes a little crazy, it was a ride, man. What'd you think of it, John?
I really liked this movie a lot. I thought it was funny and tense and had like commentary about things. Like it wasn't, it's one of those movies that's very character driven, and I thought also very interestingly, like the filming and the editing and the scripting and the acting, all those things working together to kind of just give you a feel that you don't feel like you've seen that often, or a narrative you haven't seen, a style. Like there is a production value to this movie, and it's shot on film, and it has certain things about that make it feel very gritty and grainy, but also kind of like there's a classic. It felt like a real movie. I don't know. It just felt so interesting. And there are moments where there are people in a car talking and they're on a road trip, and you just feel like they found an interesting new way to film people in a car on a road trip that reminds you of those times when you've been in a car on a road trip and how long that can feel and how stuck with people you can feel. And you say Zola, she kind of goes on this adventure. If you know anything about this, you may have heard the broad strokes of it, but I think we're wise not to spoil too much. But it is just, she's basically going out of town on a job with people she doesn't know very well. And so it's a road trip, and it's a misadventure in that way. And the way some of the stuff ramps up may remind you of like a Tarantino film, or I heard someone refer to the sort of the back half of Boogie Nights when everything's in free fall and it's just out of control. It kind of reminds you of those moments where you're just kind of living in a scene that makes you uncomfortable. And there's a great lead character, Zola. And I do not have the script, the cast list up, but who's the actress that plays Zola, the lead of this?
Taylor Page.
Taylor Page. Yeah. She was, I can't believe I'm spacing on what was the coming of age movie that we watched about the guy?
Boogie.
I mean, I remembered her from that. I'm sure she's done other things, but I remember in that thinking she really made an impression on me beyond maybe that movie in some ways. So she was really good in this. Riley Keough has been great before, and like it's a real transformative performance for her. She really goes for it. I don't know, the guy that plays Derek. I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of mentioning things I liked about this movie. I mean, it definitely will be maybe some people's cup of tea, and other people may find it a little off-putting, but I think Janicza Bravo, she just knows how to, like, the staging of things, the timing of things. There's a weird kind of subtle, odd, naturalistic tone to these movies that feels very real, but also very surreal. Was that movie called Tangerine, the movie that was shot on
the iPhone? Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly like that, but it was a similar kind of like going into a world where you get the pace and the speed of these characters, and you see how the stakes in some ways are different from the movies you normally see, but in other ways the stakes are just as big as you would get in like an action movie. And after I saw this, I showed the trailer to my wife, and I mean, I love them. Like the trailer have you ever done that where you see a movie and then you watch the trailer and the trailer gets you like really into the movie?
Yeah,
Like it just got me so excited about so many of the moments in it. But I think it was really interesting, and it was odd how funny it was in a way that you don't often see, despite being in some ways a very upsetting movie.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So
yeah, it's worth checking out, man. Did you see it, Steve?
Yeah, I watched it. I love Riley Keough. Like I think she is so good. And Taylor Page I really like too. I liked her in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's right.
So was Colton Domingo, right? He was
Yep. I didn't really know much about it. I know Ronald had mentioned it a few times, like, when we watched Boogie, that, she was involved with this movie. And I remember seeing or hearing about the Twitter thread or the story that came down on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, that's a good comparison. This movie is just like a ride. And I thought it was really good, actually. It kind of surprised me how much I was into it, because I didn't really know much about it beyond like where it kind of placed in like the headlines when it was kind of going around. But it does feel like kind of like a breath of fresh air kind of movie too, like a different kind of style to it. A pretty awesome cast. Like I think you mentioned Nicholas Braun in it. I really like him in it too. He's from Succession. Most people probably know him from Succession.
Was he Derek?
Yeah.
I didn't mention him, but his performance was incredible in this.
Yeah, he's really good. But yeah, man, it's like a really cool movie, and I think it's on video on demand now. You said, I think now,
video on demand.
You did the A24 screen they did last night.
Yeah,
but it's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're aware of the story. Seeing it realized in a narrative film was pretty exciting, and I don't know, something about Riley Keough like really draws me in. Like I really like her. Like Mad Max, she had a smaller role, but like the Lodge, last year we were talking about her in The Lodge, and even in some movies that I've seen her in where like I didn't really like love the movies entirely. Like I thought she was really good in what was it? Hold the Dark and It Comes at Night, and the Girlfriend Experience, that show that she was on. She's really just like has this charisma. I think that just like is really just like magnetic watching her, especially right when you were introduced to her in this movie, like at that restaurant scene, you know, right when they first meet. It's just like, damn, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, when
Like
she gives her that compliment just out of the
yeah,
blue.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
intense, man.
yeah. It was cool, man. No, this is good. I really enjoyed this. I'm glad you reminded me to check it out because it was really good.
Yeah, I watched it twice. I watched the screener and then I watched it like this morning. It did something to me, man. Like you're right, Riley Keough and Taylor's. You know, it's interesting because like at first you think that this is a relationship worth salvaging, and then you realize that Zola's doing much more than the other characters doing in some of the scenes. Like she's kind of a lot more aware of her surroundings than a lot of other people, which is really cool to watch. So when you watch it a second time, it's almost like watching a horror film. You start to see the deception of all of it starts a lot earlier than when she said it started. And you start to see like weird stuff that she's doing during the course of the movie. Yeah, so I loved it, man. Worth checking out. So okay, so we all agree it's worth seeing. That's cool.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of shit, man. We covered a lot of stuff. And I feel like we've kind of, if you look at the time markers on this YouTube, it's like 20 things. It's like 20 things we touched on. Feel accomplished.
Good.
Really
good.
accomplished.
It is funny that like it feels like not that things are by any means back to normal because it's like I think we have a long way to go still, and hopefully we don't like retreat back into an old version of what's been going on. I don't know, we'll see over the last year, but it does feel interesting, and like it does feel like there's like this sense of like there's so much stuff coming out, you know, like
so
whether
much.
it's TV, whether it's the Disney Marvel stuff on Disney Plus, or like, you know, Zola, like these video on demand, like the theatrical window also shrinking. It's like, you know, if you didn't get to see stuff in theaters, like Quiet Place 2 being on video on demand now, like it just seems like, you know, over the last week or two, I've felt this like variety in terms of like what I see people posting that they're watching or enjoying, which is cool. And like, you know, Netflix is never at a loss for having tons of stuff available, like so much so that you kind of forget what's there sometimes, which is like, you know, to their detriment, I guess. But, you know, just it's cool that, you know, there's some sense of like things starting to come out again, you know, and having a lot of options and variety and choices into the kinds of movies you can watch. I mean, like we just talked about Fear Street, Space Jam, Never Have I Ever, Zola. You know, these are all very different properties and available in different means, you know, in different ways. You know, Black Widow is still being available on Disney Premier Access if you want it, if you haven't seen it in theaters. But it's just like it's a cool time, I think, to kind of get that sense of options back and variety. And I just love over the last week how many different kinds of things I had an opportunity to watch, which was just great, I think.
Agreed.
Agreed. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for 307. Thanks for coming back to the Movie Schmovie podcast and hanging out with us for a bit. Like I said before, I think next week we're going to commit to doing the next episode of the Watch 'Em All.
Watch 'Em All. Nightmare on Elm Street
Nightmare
5.
on Elm Street.
The Dream Child and Freddy's Dead, which is Nightmare on Elm Street. Is it just called Freddy's Dead, or is it Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead? Or
I don't think there's a
6 in the
I don't know if there's a 6 in it. I don't know. I have to see when I rewatch it.
But Nightmare on Elm Street 5 and 6. Actually, if you think about it, the movies that kind of wrap up the regular series of Nightmare on Elm Street, we still have more Nightmare on Elm Street or Freddy Krueger movies to watch for our Watch 'Em All to complete it. But 5 and 6 are the last like proper original timeline Nightmare on Elm Street movies, right? Because you got a versus
I think,
Jason, a remake,
yeah.
and then a kind of creative reboot.
New Nightmare. Yeah. I think you're right.
So we're closing it out next week. So
Yep.
you've got time now to seek those fine films. No, these are the worst, possibly in the series. But yes, watch them so that you can get all of our jokes next time, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You can find the podcast all major podcast platforms, but to make it easy, you can just go to movieshmovie.com. You can listen to every episode we've ever put out there if you want, or you can kind of jump from there to whatever podcast platform you prefer to subscribe to us through. And we really appreciate it if you had an opportunity, if it's there, to do a review or a rating, or even just hit that little square with the arrow going up where you can share it to all kinds of different places, and maybe send it to a friend, or a family member, or somebody who you are going to talk about movies with in the future. We'd appreciate it. And
Cool.
we joked about it at the top of the show, but the Marvel Schmarvel feed is a YouTube exclusive that we do kind of around the Marvel properties coming out in theaters or on the Disney Plus service. So if you want to catch up on that, if you're maybe just getting through Loki and want to see what we thought about that series, you can find that on our youtube.com/movie page. And subscribe there. You'll get the bell, hit the bell, get the alerts for those episodes and this. I mean, this podcast publishes there too, so you could even watch us on YouTube every week if you like. But either way, it's appreciated if you can find a way to follow us and keep up with what we're putting out there, because we have a good time getting together every week and still going. This pandemic, if one thing, we've streamlined our commitment to the show and to each other, and it's always nice to see you guys every week, and hopefully we can keep that going.
Absolutely, man.
I'm good. If you guys are, anything else you want to say?
Good.
I'm good.
All right. Well, as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.